Okay. Can you see the slide? Yes.
We can see the slide, but it's still like in slide deck mode. So we're seeing
Is
like
it?
the partial screen. I know this isn't my forte either. So
Uh, so you see, let
yeah,
me,
we're seeing, yeah, sort of the deck instead of seeing it in presentation mode.
how about now?
Still in the deck mode.
Yeah, what? Uh, how about now?
Looks good. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So now you can see just what you're supposed to see, right?
Just all of our faces and the one first slide. That's it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So we're gonna go over the A through G graduation requirements. There's a new bulletin that was published at the beginning of the school year. It captures the requirements for the class of 2024 through 2027. So just a quick overview, it's a roadmap that, obviously we try to support students throughout their, preschool to college and career. Um, and we'll try to get them college ready. So there are some elements of the graduation requirements when the board adopted these a few years ago to make it A through G. So it's a LUSD A through G graduation requirements, and we call them the three buckets that pretty much make up what the graduation requirements are, what the students must complete. So there's A through G, which is aligned to the CSU, Cal State system, and then we have the LUSD add-ons that we require, and then there's a CDE, which is the California Department of Education requirement. So all three elements need to be completed in order for the students to meet the graduation requirements. Excuse me. So we're aligned to the CSU with the 15 minimum A through G college prep courses for graduation. A through G, each subject letter is equates to a specific subject. On this chart, you'll see the number of years that are required minimum for A through G. And there are, like, for example, in math, subject area C, there are some rules of validation that come into play. For science, there's also some validations that come into play with chemistry. There are nuances to this, and we'll get into it, in a little bit. And then language other than English, is also, subject to validation rules. Excuse me. So validation basically is when a student completes an advanced course with a C or better in an area of sequential knowledge, and that would grant them the validation. And there's again, as seen in the previous slide, math, chemistry only for CSU, and language other than English are where the validation rules apply. However, there are caveats to it, and because of the CDE, and we'll get into that as soon as I can find my mouse. Okay. So the CDE is basically the non-negotiables part of our graduation requirements. It's state requirements. And so what we go through is the students need to pass 3 years of social science. The non-negotiables are they must be world history, it must be US history, and it needs to be a semester of government and economics. Minimum for CDE is English, 3 years. We require 4 because of the A through G alignment. Math, it's 2 years, but the caveat there is that it needs to be in seat. 2 years need to be in seat between the 9th and 12th grade. One course of which has to be Algebra 1 or a course that meets or exceeds the rigor of Algebra 1. And then so on and so forth. You need a year of biological and physical, 1 year of visual performing arts or foreign language or CTE, and then 2 years of PE. And then our add-ons for LUSD, so we require the kids to complete service learning, a career pathway selection, and then starting with the class of 2027, which is our current 9th graders, they must complete a semester of ethnic studies. Students must take health, and then they have to have a cumulative credit of 210 credits minimum. And this is just a overview of what we just went through in chunking it, and then just in the chat, just jot what can you explain the difference between the CDE, LUSD, and A through G requirements? You don't, just pop it in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat as well. I can't see the chat now. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yes, CD is the basics. A through G is the most rigorous. Yes, A through G is aligned to CSU. A through, yes, UC, okay, CD are non-negotiables. Very good. Great. So even though I have you after lunch, you're still there. All right. So we're gonna move on. And we're gonna go through each subject in a summarized version. So on the left of in this screen in this slide, you'll see that for CSU, there's 2 years minimum required in subject area A, otherwise known as history, social science. And so it lets you know what variations the student can pass with a C or better in order to meet the CSU requirement for history. However, like we mentioned previously, as a CDE is non-negotiable in this particular subject area. So the students must pass those courses on the right, world history, US history, government, and economics, in order for them to meet the minimum requirement for graduation. And then English, they need to take 4 years to meet graduation requirements. These are some of the sequences that we have depending on your school's bell schedule. Sometimes there's extra B subject area courses, but these are the requirements that students must take, minimum requirements. There is a substitution rule that is applied to English. The caveat with this is that the student needs to be scheduled in the grade level English course during a semester. And then if they fail that course, or they get a D, then they can use another subject area B English class to substitute the class for grad requirements. So basically, if you look at the graph at the bottom, this is a grad standards snapshot from MISIS, where it says ELA enrollment. You'll notice that there's a check mark on 9, 10, and 11, but there is an X on 12. That means that that student has not been enrolled or didn't attempt grade level English 12. So that's where a substitution rule wouldn't apply, because MISIS is going to be looking for Expo Comp, AP English Lit, the senior English elective. So those are the nuances attached to the substitution rule, that they have to attempt the grade level English course first for the substitution rules to apply. And this is just a graphic of an example of this. Student takes English 10A in the fall of 10th grade and gets an F. And in the fall of 10th grade, the student also takes writing seminar A and gets a C. So that C can substitute for the F because the student attempted the English 10. But it wasn't omitted, it was attempted. That's just an example of that. And then I'm not sure if some of you are piloting the new ELD courses. I know we have a new ELD policy that was released earlier this year as well. And there's going to be entirely all new ELD courses from 6th to 12th grade. The high school classes are A through G. What you see there is the B subject area are English 10AB and ELD 11AB. And then you have the G for ELD 9 and 12. All schools will be using these courses next year for the ELD students. In the subject area C, we have math. Again, the policy of LUSD is that the students should be enrolled in math from 9th through 12th to 11th grade, and obviously grade 12 enrollment is strongly recommended. Students sometimes take a C approved math class in the middle school. Those courses do count toward their high school graduation requirements, as well as A through G if they get a C or better, but they will not receive numerical credit for the course. And again, that caveat where the CDE requires that students between the 9th and 12th grade must have a minimum of 2 years of math in order for them to qualify to meet the minimum CDE requirement. And these are just some examples of the math course sequences that are available. Depending on what entry level course the student comes in 9th grade will depend on what they took in middle school, and their grade is obviously, but this is just an example of what the pathways are. And then validation is another rule that is applied in math. So in this example, the student failed the first semester of algebra, got a D the second semester. Validation only is with a C or better, but the student got a B in algebra 2 AB. In this example, the student would have validated algebra 1 and algebra 2 because of the B. But we have to be careful with the CDE rule because they do need to have the 2 years of seat time. So in this case, the student only has 1 year of seat time in this example for them to meet CDE. So they need 1 more year of math. In this example, the student failed the first semester of geometry, but passed the second semester. So that would validate the first semester. One of the rules that applies to validation is that if the student doesn't, for whatever reason, take geometry A, but successfully completes the second semester of geometry B, then they can validate the first semester. Not sure why that would happen, but sometimes maybe students transfer from schools and come the second semester of a school year. But this is one of the rules, again, being mindful that the students need the 2 full years of seat time in math with a minimum of D or better to meet the CDE requirement for math. And geometry doesn't, geometry validates geometry, it does not validate algebra. And then I know, I believe Lila might be speaking to this later for the exemption of the waivers that are available for students where the IEP may deem that, algebra 2 or the second year LOTE is something they're gonna apply for a waiver, and that's specified in their IEP. The caveat with this is that if a student receives a waiver for algebra 2, they are no longer eligible for A through G requirements, that they need to meet the minimum requirements for eligibility. Same thing for the LOTE, they need 2 years of the same language to meet the eligibility requirements for college. And then we're off to science, 2 years. It's pretty straightforward, 1 year of biological, 1 year of physical. And the validation of chemistry is allowed for Cal States only. However, the CDE requires 1 full year of biological and 1 full year of physical, and CDE does not recognize validation. So we have to be careful with that rule as well. Because in this case, if a student, in this example, student gets an F the first semester, passes it second semester of chemistry with a C, they do validate for Cal State, but they would not meet the minimum requirement for the CDE, which means they are not eligible to graduate. So in this example, we have a student here is has passed biology A and B with a C and a D, and then passed chemistry A and B with an F and a C. And then they take interactions. So in this example, has the student met the minimum LAUSD science requirement for graduation? And there's a little side note there, that interactions is a physical science. So does this student have 1 full year of physical science and 1 full year of biological science met for graduation? And we can you can answer this question in the chat. Perfect. So 75.
And I put a poll up too, yeah.
Yes, I see that. Thank you. I was like, oh, there it is. Perfect. All right. So we see about 60% of the group says yes, 38% says no. We'll go a few more seconds so we have more participation. Again, interactions is a physical science. So did that student complete 1 year of physical and 1 year of biological? And we shall see. We can end the poll if you
Okay,
want.
I just
Share the
ended it
results.
and I'm sharing the results. Yep.
Perfect. So 69% say yes and 31 say no. And the answer is yes, because biology A and B is a biological science, so that student has a full year of that each semester. C and a D, even though the D is not the best grade, but it is minimum passing grade. And then we have the student who failed the first semester of chemistry, but did pass the second semester of chemistry, but because interactions is a physical science, because they took that class and passed it with a C and a D, that would meet the 1 year requirement for CDE. Perfect. Yay. Thank you for participating. And okay. So language other than English is 2 years of the same language. Students can take LOT in 7th and 8th grade to satisfy the A through G and the LAUSD graduation requirement, but they will not receive numerical credit. Validation rules do apply, so a higher sequential course with a C or better will validate the lower level class. And again, the students with disabilities have to pass 1 year of low course with a D or better in order to qualify for the exemption from the second year. Another piece with this is that low doesn't require seat time, so students can take an equivalency test and meet the requirement that way. Okay. And F, we're almost at the G. So visual performing arts is 1 year with a D or better. And the caveat here is that it has to be the same discipline. So in this example here, you have, well, the disciplines are dance, music, theater, and visual arts. And they can take VPA anytime between 9th and 12th grade. And this is an example. I think we have another poll question for this, where we have a student A who took a semester of theater and a semester of photo. And then we have student B who took a semester of choir and a semester of guitar. Which student meets the minimum visual performing arts graduation requirement in these scenarios?
Yep, and poll is launched.
All right, and we have 70 and 80% saying student B, 32% saying A. We'll give a few minutes, I mean, a few seconds here to have the participants pick their answers and then we'll share. We have about 70 participants who've put their question in or their answer. So 73 say B, 29 say student A.
All right, and I've ended the poll and here are the results.
All right, so 71% say student B and 29% say student A. So the result is student B. Oops, and my little animation didn't go all the way to the bottom of this, but choir and guitar are part of the same discipline because it's music. And so that student, even though it's not necessarily the same subject, because it's the same discipline, they would meet the music, they would meet the minimum 1 year of the same discipline requirement, as opposed to student A, who's theater 1A is a theater class and photo is a visual arts class. So it's two different disciplines. So they would not meet the minimum for VPA here. All right, thank you. And then Lastly, here with A through G, in terms of A through G, it's G is a college prep elective. So they must take 2 semesters, 2 classes, basically. Economics and principles of or government usually satisfies the G requirement for students. So that's and basically anything that's A through G will go into the G bucket. But they do need 1 year of that. And then they need 2 years of PE, CIF sanctioned interscholastic competitive sports count toward the PE requirement. And I know some students may play football, and then in the off season they get into advanced conditioning. That also is okay for PE requirement, for the PE requirement. And these are the courses, just the overview. 1 semester of health. I know there may be some teachers in the virtual space that work at pilot schools or maybe partnership schools. They have other options to meet the health requirement, but for the most part, aside from the pilots and the partnerships, every student must take 1 semester of health for graduation. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the class of 2027 needs to complete 1 semester of ethnic studies, and they can complete it at any point between 9th and 12th grade. And then we have our non-course requirements, the career pathway, the service learning, the minimum numerical credit requirement. And then the grade levels to promote from one grade level to the other. And usually grade level promotions are completed in MICES by the fall norm day. And just a quick, I know some of you may have seen this already, but we have a new redesigned bedazzled IGP. So our individualized graduation plan, it really details the courses that the students have completed in middle and high school. And it really does help synthesize if they're meeting graduation requirements. It's a good talking point for the students as well as the parents. I know they all have they must all have one annual IGP between 6th and 12th grade. So students should be familiar with this document. And again, it encapsulates the 3 buckets, the A through G, the LUSD, and the CDE. So we'll just take a quick tour of what components are there, the overview. In this, and what we did was the IGP originally, if you remember, it was pages and pages. And so this is, we've kind of streamlined it where most of, the courses are on one sheet, so it's easier to read. So you don't have to, scroll through multiple pages. But here in this example, in column 1, you'll have the A through G bucket, and it tells, it calls out how many years have been completed and how many years are required. And then it has the CDE on the same column, and it says how many credits have been completed for the required courses under CDE, and then math, English, etc. So it has it by subject area for the A through G CDE. And then column 2 will indicate or illustrates the courses that have been completed and the grades that and the credits earned. Okay, so that'll in by subject area. And then column 3 calls out what they are currently enrolled in for the term. And then column 4 and 5 of that page, basically the required courses column is identifies which courses the student still needs to complete in order to meet the minimum requirement for graduation. And then the last column indicates with a yes or a no whether they have met the CDE, the LAUSD, the CSU, and or the UC requirement. And then the last column on that page has an overview of some things there that we'll go into. The graduation eligibility lets them know the credits that they need to promote and the credits that they have. And then it indicates whether they've completed the service learning and the career pathway and what that career pathway is. It has a link to the college and career readiness guide there. It calls out their current schedule as well. It has if they've had any college enrollment, dual enrollment, a big thing. So it lists the course they took and the grades and the credits they received. It also has, excuse me, the different GPAs that are available for the student and any testing data that's available. Oops. And with that, I have resources that you have if you want to read further about the IGP or ethnic studies, or if you want to read the graduation requirements as the resources there. And if you have any questions, hopefully I have the answer.
Thank you. I do see a question in the chat.
Okay.
John Patrick asked, what does a student receive if they achieve CDE requirements only because they needed to meet LUSD requirements for a diploma? The A through G and the so if they've only met CDE, if they haven't met, I'm guessing A through G, or maybe also missing the LUSD requirements.
So there's different exemptions that students may qualify for. So like foster youth, probationary youth, migratory youth, sometimes they qualify for the CDE requirement. So if they meet that eligibility, the criteria, then they can graduate with the CDE requirement only. But for the most part, because LUSD adopted the A through G, there are some exemptions. Again, with the IEP, the team can decide whether the student will go and attempt or take Algebra 2 or that second year of LOPE. But for the most part, the CDE is only as a graduation, is not an option unless they meet the criteria for the exemption under foster, migratory newcomers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Sounds like you answered his question.
All right.
That's the only question I saw in the chat.
There's one more from Genevieve. Genevieve asked a question.
Does passing Algebra 2A validate Algebra 1A and or B?
Oh.
So if you pass Algebra 2A with a C or better and the student failed Algebra 1, A or B, A and or B, the Algebra 2A will validate the Algebra 1, the entire series. If the student failed algebra, the first semester of Algebra 1, second semester of Algebra 1, or got a D, and then failed Algebra 2A, but passes Algebra 2B with a C or better, it'll validate the entire series of algebra, not geometry, with the caveat that the students need to pass 2 years of math minimum from between 9th and 12th grade. They need to pass with a D minimum, at least 2 years of math. So if they validate, they may meet the requirement for A through G, but they need the seat time. So I hope that answers the question.
Looks like it did. And I just have to say, I really appreciate you reviewing the validation rules. I mean, we're definitely not experts, and I don't think I could walk away from this being an expert, but just having a quick review and refresher of those is really helpful. I also wanted to say that for on the SPED side, I don't know if you've been working on this with the alternate curriculum team, but there is the new alternative pathway to a diploma that's coming down the pipeline. So last year's ninth graders who are eligible to take the California alternate assessment, which is generally students on the alternate curriculum, there is going to be a new pathway for them to earn a diploma, which is somewhat like an exemption that you were just talking about. And so for those of you in DOTS, we're going to get a training on that. James Kuhn's team is going to train us in the future, but it's really helpful to understand the differences between the CDE and the A through G requirements, because students who are eligible for the new alternate diploma pathway will only have to complete CDE requirements and will be a new exemption category basically in LA Unified. So
that's cool.
in the Division of Special Ed, James Kuntz and his team are working on that. So that's only for this year's 10th graders. So that's what the law says. It starts with last year's 9th graders, which is this year's 10th graders. So it does not apply to this current year's graduating or leaving class. So that's why you haven't probably heard a lot of information about it yet, as they're still kind of working out, as you can imagine, all of the changes that need to happen in MISIS in order to make this happen.
So this is for class of 2026.
Yes, class of 2026.
Starting with the class of 2026.
Correct, starting with the class of 2026, exactly. So your presentation was a really great baseline because those students will have to meet CDE, but not A through G, but many of the same kind of concepts apply to that. So thank you, really
Yeah. And I think I
helpful.
see one last question there. It says, seat time also means passing with a D. Yes, that's what it means. So seat time, they have to have the minimum passing grade, which for LUSD is D. So as long as they have 2 years of seat time, whether it's a combination of A, B, C, D, then they're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I put the resources organizer in the chat, and so it has today's presentation. Everyone that's participating, the feedback survey is in the resources organizer. So thank you so much, Rosanna. And
Yeah, no
you're
worries.
correct. Leila Rondell was going to present, but she's actually at a conference. So we have somebody from
Oh,
Leila's team who's coming to present now. So
okay.
right after you. So feel free to stay on, but I'm actually gonna, or feel free to leave as well. This is recorded. I'm actually gonna hand it over to Joyce and introduce Joyce to all of you. So Joyce Radcliffe is a specialist for the TK through 12 core instruction program in the Division of Special Education. She oversees professional development for core special education teachers. She previously worked as an APIS program specialist and resource specialist teacher. And Joyce is going to be presenting on the more specific exemptions for students with disabilities and a few other things that Leila, Joyce, and I determined would be a great fit with this presentation and a great refresher for all of you guys. So Joyce, I hopefully made you a co-host successfully so you can share your screen, and I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Happy to be here. As Jackie said, I am filling in for Leila today, so I will do my best to answer any of your questions that come up. All right, so before I get into the electives and the waivers and the Learning Center, I do want to highlight the master schedule. So this is one of the biggest tools that we use to ensure equity for students at schools. And the best practice is to program those students with disabilities first, and especially for secondary sites, you know, by strategically organizing the class schedules, admin really can ensure that those co-teaching partnerships have compatible teaching periods, conference periods, and it really allows for that collaborative teaching model to happen at school sites. And I know that DOTS does not specifically handle scheduling, but it's just good to keep in mind as we move forward with this work. All right, so first we're going to look at a few elective options. I do want to note that these are not available at all schools. However, I do want to make sure that you are aware of what is available. So this first one, sorry, I'm going to move our faces around here. There we go. This first one on your left is middle school and is preparing for high school and beyond, and this is a year-long course. And then the high school course is a semester long. I believe this falls under the G elective, and it's for 21st century career exploration. And I believe the scope and sequence for these courses are linked in the resource sheet that is available for you all today. And these courses can be mixed, so it can be general education students and special ed students, and they can be co-taught by a gen ed or special ed teacher. If it's all special ed students, then it can be taught by solely a special education teacher. All right, so the next elective we have that is available at some school sites is social skills elective. Once again, the middle school course is going to be that year-long course, and then that high school course is going to be the semester-long. Any student can enroll into these courses. However, this course was developed with autism in mind. So for those kiddos that have autism and perhaps lack some of those social skills or have deficits in that area, this course was meant for them. However, if we think about having students in a classroom all together that all have social deficits, I think we can see a little bit of issue with that. We want peer models, we want them to be integrated, but this course is available. And that is the electives. All right, and I know some of this is going to be repeat, but we'll go in a little more in depth for it. So graduation requirements for students with disability on the core curriculum are the same for any student on the core curriculum. However, as mentioned in the previous presentation, there is a waiver for Algebra 2 and then language other than English LOT requirements. And then the IEP, will look at data and have that discussion, and then they need to select a substitute course for the Algebra 2 or the LOT. Before we take a closer look at these waivers, I want to bring up that we want all our students to have that access to rigor. So, instead of automatically thinking, oh, student has an IEP, disability, let's bring out the waiver. No, we want to really give students a chance to exceed and have access to that rigor and support them with accommodations, supports, and services before we think about giving that waiver. And like I said, the waiver, it needs to be an IEP team discussion. There needs to be student data. So I just want to, kind of frame our mind around that. And for example, Southgate High School, that's one of the schools we work at, that's an inclusive site. They rarely use this waiver for their students, and their students with disabilities are able to pass these classes. So these waivers are a great tool to use for students that need them. However, we do not want to overuse the waiver for students that perhaps may succeed in those classes. All right, so there is a bulletin. As you see there, this is also linked in your resource sheet. Page 22 specifically goes over the waivers and exceptions. There's attachment I for math, and then the attachment J for LOT. I do want to highlight here that Algebra 2, the waiver, once it is attached to that IEP, let's say the discussion was had, data was shared, you upload the waiver to the IEP, that student is no longer eligible for a CSU or UC campus, okay? So it's really important that the parent knows this, the student knows that. The student should be involved in the IEP meetings at this point. So I just, want to reiterate that this is important to have this discussion and make sure parents and students are aware that that is something that comes along with a waiver, is they're not eligible for attendance in the CSU or UC campus. And the bulletin, like I said, includes all of the substitute classes, and same with LOT year 2. The same thing goes with the CSU and UC. They're not eligible for that. And this is not available for LOT year 1. So they have to pass that, and then LOT year 2, they're able to waive. All right, so here's what the attachments look like that you would be filling out with the team and having that robust discussion. And then this would be attached to the IEP via Welligent. All right, now let's look at the Algebra 1 waiver. Is there a waiver for Algebra 1? Yes. However, there's much more involved than just having a discussion, signing off, and attaching to the IEP. Since Algebra 1 is a state requirement for a diploma, it needs board approval and CDE approval. And Leela did share with me that in the past 3 years, no waiver for Algebra 1 has been approved. Okay, so that brings me back, okay, how are we going to support our students in passing Algebra 1, looking at the service models, the supports and accommodations? I was an inclusion teacher for high school freshmen, and a lot of the students were coming from special day into the inclusion model. And I worked with that Algebra 1 teacher. I was in there every day. I was co-planning, how am I going to get students access? and all of my students did pass Algebra 1. So it is possible. It does take work on teachers' end and the students' end, but you know, with the correct supports, they are able to be successful in there. All right, so I did sprinkle a few check-ins today. The first one, and this is true, false, very simple. T for true, F for false. Just drop it in the chat. All right, Lote Year 1 has a waiver. True or false? Yay, yes, false. So remember, just Lote Year 2 has that waiver. All right, good job, everyone. You're still with me, thank you. All right, next one. A student is no longer eligible for CSU or UC campuses with that attached waiver. Yep, true. All right, you guys on it. You're on it, on a roll. Okay. Next one. All students should have a waiver for Algebra 2. False. Yay. All right. You passed with flying colors. Yep, false. All right. Now we are going to take a quick look into reclassification of LTELs. There is an updated bulletin for reclassification as of this January. And the major update here includes that students are able to be reclassified as early as 3rd grade now. So on prior bulletins, it was later grades, 4th and 5th. Now students can start as early as 3rd grade. And then the other big change is that the ELD Learning Center is no longer an option. So for Learning Center, the options prior were ELA, Math, and ELD. So the ELD option is no longer available, which means that students with disabilities who are EL students or EB students do need to be scheduled in the ELD course with their general education peers. Okay, and that's just, you know, to make sure that they're using that state curriculum for ELD. And we, like I said, peer models and that integration is so important to give students with disabilities access to their, you know, their peers. So that option for ELD Learning Center has been removed. All right. So here is what the attachments for reclassification through the IEP look like. As you see, this is not a waiver, okay? This is a worksheet. So the team, once again, will meet, go over student data, and determine if they're recommending the student for reclassification through the IEP. Now, this will be attached to the IEP. It does not automatically mean the student's reclassified once this is attached. This has to go through region approval as well. But this is the discussion worksheet. And it is important to note that administrators do need to be present at this IEP meeting for this discussion. Okay, I know sometimes we have admin designees at IEP meetings and they are not always the administrator, but when we are talking about reclassification through the IEP at an IEP team meeting, an administrator does need to be present. All right, so this is just always a good question to circle back to when we're speaking about LTELs. So is the student's English language proficiency commensurate with that of a native English speaking peer with a similar disability in the same grade? That's always kind of the question we want to ask ourselves when we're determining, is this a disability or is this language acquisition, right? Is that what's going on? So for example, a student with autism who is an English only student and another student with autism who is an English learner. We can compare if they're having the same difficulties, right? So if so, we know it is perhaps a disability impacting rather than a language acquisition. So this is just a little reminder. All right, another check-in. All right, students can now reclassify starting in grade 2. Bonus points for you. What grade can they start reclassifying in? Yay, 3. Yes, you guys are really paying attention. All right. Yes, 3, they can start reclassification in, which is great. I'm hoping by the time they're in high school, most students have reclassified at that point. All right, here you go. All right, administrator is required to attend the IEP meeting when completing the reclassification worksheet. Yep, true. All right. Okay, the last little, I want to say little, but the last section, it is brief, is the Learning Center. As you can see, that big under construction. We have been working very hard on updating this reference guide. As you can see, the date for this one, the most current one is 2016. So we are working to update the Learning Center Bulletin. It is routing currently as we speak. So just some updates to include that are included are we, updated the Learning Center expectations. We know that schools sometimes use the Learning Center to support students, perhaps like a study hall or, homework time. And although, we want to support our students with organizational skills and getting caught up, the Learning Center is really meant for, working on those foundational skills to give them access to the general education curriculum. And then also we're making updates to the recommended curriculum material. So some of you may know that this year it was mandatory for all resource teachers and inclusion teachers to be trained in the 95% program, which is a reading intervention program. So that curriculum material recommendation is now listed in the Learning Center reference guide. So stay tuned. It's coming. All right. And I mentioned this before, in the Learning Center reference guide, this will be taken out, that ELD course. So that will no longer be an option for Learning Center. It will only be reading and math. All right. I know that was very brief, but that is the material we have for you all today. Once again, I'm Joyce Radcliffe. I'm so happy to be here. And then Leila Rondeau is the administrative coordinator. You can feel free to contact her. I will also leave my email in the chat just in case. And I will pass it on to you, Jackie.
Thank you. That was a great connection between the two trainings. Thank you so much for that. I think that it was really complementary to the first training that we had. So thank you for going into a little bit more depth on some of the special education specifics. So I think it was helpful to know personally that there have been no Algebra 2 waivers granted in the last few years, because we often talk about the waiver, but knowing that I'm sorry, that's Algebra 1, right? Algebra 1, but knowing that it's not something that is likely very easily accessible, while of course it's a legal option, it seems like probably very last resort. So not probably something we would start off with discussing while students in 9th grade, for example. They should be given support and opportunities to pass Algebra 1 before that would even be a conversation. So does anybody have any additional questions for Joyce? I'm not seeing any. I will say that Christina had a great question. I had brought up the alternate pathway to a diploma. It's still in the works, but just please know again that that is going to apply to students who are eligible for the California alternate assessment only, which is generally students on the alt curriculum. So we're not talking about students on the core curriculum who will be eligible for CDE requirements only. We're talking about students eligible for the CAA assessment, the California Alternate Assessment. And it does not apply. Students' graduation year, their cohort year never changes. So this year's 10th grade students are the class, as Rosanna said, of 2026. they will always be the class of 2026. This year's 12th grade students will always be the class of 2024. So they fall under that graduation year requirement. It's not going to change because they ended up staying in school longer. They don't then become the class of 2025 and become the class of 2026. So that wasn't specific to your presentation, Joyce, but just sharing it with the team. James Coombstein is going to come and give us a presentation on the alternate pathway to a diploma. We will be receiving that once the presentation materials are ready. So more to come on that. But before we say goodbye to Joyce, last call, any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a question. Some schools, they give students now who have IEPs financial algebra. So does that replace algebra 2?
What does what replace algebra 2? Sorry, I didn't hear that first part.
Financial algebra.
You know, I know that's in the bulletin what can replace. I do not know that offhand which courses can replace, but I know it's listed in the bulletin. Yes. So if you want to review the bulletin and see if that course is on there, then that should be okay if it is.
Thanks, Joyce. And that bulletin's in the resources organizer?
Yes, that one sheeter. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'll post it in the chat one more time, but Joyce has added that bulletin to the resources organizer. So totally understand. I have not memorized any course lists either for anything, but yeah, Christina, you can go ahead and review the bulletin and see if it's listed there. So one last time, I'll put the resources organizer in the chat. If you have not yet completed the survey for today, please go ahead and do so to give us your feedback. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you all for joining and being so attentive during today's training. And we're ending a little bit early, which is great. You have a little bit extra time that you hadn't planned on. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again so much.